first free emotional survival for first responders training. I want to welcome you on the stream into the Neurosculpting Institute, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing here and what my mission is in specific terms of serving first responders. So my name is Lisa Wimberger, and I run a bunch of different organizations. I run the Transpersonal Consulting Group, which is specifically targeted at serving first responders, getting them some emotional survival trainings, some information on brain and physiology in order to help you all deal with your stress and the reality of your day-to-day job. I also run the Neurosculpting Institute, where we teach these same techniques and information to the public, and we teach a mental entrainment process called neurosculpting, which you'll get a little bit of a taste of today. I've been serving first responders since 2007, and it's been a very rewarding and difficult journey because, as you all know on the stream, your money at your agency is probably allocated to tactical training and probably not allocated to preventative classes on mental health and well-being. Of course, if you experience a critical incident, then you know you have your EAP services to go to, but in the agencies that I've been in, there hasn't been a lot of money allocated to preventative trainings, and that's basically what I offer, is the preventative trainings. So to date, I've personally trained over 1,000 officers. Some of those are also military and CIA and FBI and Homeland Security and Secret Service. So I have been spending a lot of my time focusing on getting you what you need to have a long and rewarding career. None of what we do here is therapy, so this class may be a little different for you. So what is all of this that we're doing today? We're going to talk in our very brief time together, it's only an hour, we're going to talk a little bit about stress and your body, the brain state of stress, how you can start to recognize it before you even feel it, and then what you can do to mitigate the stress your body is experiencing in your day-to-day. We're going to talk about diet and food. We're going to talk about mental entrainment, and you're going to have an experience of the mental entrainment exercises that you can use in a way that serves you best. I wanted to start talking a little bit about your day-to-day stress. You know, I realize statistics vary, and I realize there's a lot of controversy around what statistics are real and what are not when it comes to law enforcement and suicide. But from the last 7 years of doing this, what I have discovered is that the suicide rates for first responders, law enforcement, is far higher than in any other vocation. It's actually higher than on-the-job deaths, which seems a little bit ridiculous when you think about the fact that you put yourself in harm's way every day. So death in the line of duty should be a greater risk for you than death by your own hand. And unfortunately, that is not what the statistics are showing. So what is this phenomenon of depression or suicide, or however the stress manifests, broken marriages, alcoholism, substance abuse, high blood pressure, all of these things that seem to be a little more probable in your line of work? Well, all of this comes from unmitigated stress states in the body. So if you're on the job and you're on a normal day in your job, you still have to be in a heightened sense of awareness, an alert state, a ready state, a state of readiness for action. This is an adrenaline state. And in your job, you have to be there to be a good officer, to be a good first responder. You have to be on, and you have to have all of your faculties ready for action. And this is fine. But what happens in this line of work is that we don't often know how to turn that down. And when we don't know how to turn that down when we leave work, it stays in that readiness position. And from there, we experience states of chronic stress. Even if you did not experience a critical incident at work, even if your day at work was fairly benign, you are still engaged in a heightened stress response by the very nature of what you have chosen to do. So it doesn't matter that you may have 2-3 weeks of work where there's no real traumatic incident. You are still predisposing yourself to a stress state. Now you then add on to that real critical incidents that happen in your day-to-day, real traumas, real violence, real atrocities, and then you are now adding to that stress state. So what does that stress state look like other than when you feel stressed, when you feel tense? It starts long before you feel it, and that's what I want to help you do today, is understand what the signs are before that happens. So what I have here is a brain chart. I know you might not be able to see it clearly, and you don't really need to. What I want to give you a sense of, though, is that this is a cross-section of the brain. This is the right hemisphere of the brain. So this part of your head, this over here, but you're looking at it from the inside. So if I were to take this brain and split it in half, you are looking in this picture at the inside of the right hemisphere. These are your eyes, so you can orient yourself. This is the front of the brain, called your prefrontal cortex. And this over here, the center area, the area just above the brainstem, is the area that is very active in your day-to-day job. It's the area of readiness for action. It's your fight or flight response center. This is the limbic center of the brain. These two parts of the brain play a very intimate role in your health, in your mental well-being, and in your ability to finish your career in a healthy and rewarding manner, and then retire and enjoy the fruits of your labor afterwards. If you start to understand the dynamic these two parts of the brain play, you will be able to navigate and set yourself up for the best possible scenario in your job. So let's say you go to work, you're on the job, and you get a call. Maybe you work in the Department of Crimes Against Children, and you get a call, and you go to this house. There's domestic violence, and the infant is already dead when you get to the scene. And now you have to deal with being in a heightened state of alert to take in all of the information at the scene, to deal with the domestic violence, and then to deal with the image of an infant who's possibly dead, the smells in the house, the sounds around you, all of that is streaming in through a heightened sense of alertness. So what happens when we use our brain in our day-to-day to learn, we use it in an associative way. So the smells, the sounds, the colors, the imagery, the context, the location, what you're wearing, what you ate for breakfast, anything that is fresh and in the moment related to your traumatic experience or your stress experience will be linked together through associative learning. There's all different parts of the brain that start linking these factors together. And right here in the center of the brain, in your amygdala, you store the full context of that moment, including all of the sights, the smells, the sounds, and the associations. So what you have done is you've taken a snapshot of a stressful moment, and you've made it very robust in its association, so that tomorrow, if you smell the smell that was in the house that day, you're going to have that as an access point for that snapshot, and you're going to remember that whole thing, possibly in great detail. Or 5 years later, you hear that sound, that unique sound that you happen to hear when you walked into that scene. You're going to retrieve that memory, that experience, through your associated triggers. Okay, so this is what we're doing in a day-to-day way. But this is what we're doing even more so when we're in heightened states of awareness and stress, hypervigilance. We are constantly attributing associated factors with the snapshot. And some of you on this stream may have experience with PTSD, and then you know this to be true in your experience, that you can go back to moments in a flash that are not happening right here, right now, but that are triggered by the smallest of triggers, and you are then fully engaged in an old memory. What this is both a gift and a curse at the same time. The curse of it is that our neuroplasticity, which is what this is, our ability to create a memory and load it with context and then retrieve it. The curse of the neuroplastic nature of our brains is that we can map to old negative stresses and traumas, bring them up over and over again through associations, and bam, we're in stress states all the time without a real need to be in a stress state. However, the gift of our neuroplastic brain is that we can create new stories and load them with new triggers and associated content, and mentally entrain those stories so that we have an alternate set of contextualized stories that we can retrieve instead of retrieving the ones that keep us in a state of chronic stress and disease. So through our own innate ability to learn through association, which is what neuroplasticity is, we can use that to our benefit with intention and create some alternate states other than the stress state. So I want to talk a little bit about the front part of the brain and how that plays into your day-to-day. The front part of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, which is right here, right behind the forehead and just above the eye sockets, happens to be the newest part of the brain in terms of our body's evolution. It matures last in our lifespan. So we're born with a very intact fight or flight center. It's very primitive and it is very evolved by the time we are born. So in neonatal growth, this is doing just fine. This part of the brain is not developed when we are born to its full capacity. It comes online over our lifetime and fully matures into its most robust functioning when we're in our early 20s. So, what is going on here in this growing part of the brain? It is the part of the brain most recently through neuroscience associated with our abilities to see the big picture, to empathize with someone else, to have higher thought processes like analysis, linear processing, our language abilities, our ability to experience joy and forgiveness, and a sense that we might be a part of something greater. All of these things about us happen best when this part of the brain is fully matured, fully supported. So what does that mean? It means this. Your job in your day-to-day forces you to be here. And that's where you need to be to save your life on a minute-to-minute basis. However, when you are here, this part of the brain is dominating the use of blood, oxygen, and glucose. The fuel of the brain is all going here. Not all of it, but predominantly. So if the fuel is going here, it's coming from here. This gets down-regulated when this gets up-regulated. So if you are turning down your faculties of higher thought processing, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, joy, analysis, logic, if you are down-regulating those things to up-regulate your primitive fight or flight response, well then what you're doing is you are starving this part of your brain of its ability to continue to bring those things online. Now again, in a survival situation, you don't want to be here. You don't want to empathize with someone in a domestic violence situation who's coming at you with a weapon. You don't want to do that. You want to be here. But then you go home from your job. What happens when you go home from your job? You don't want to stay here, because if you stay here, you then become unrelatable to those around you. You become suspicious, reactionary. You narrowly shrink your world day to day when you cannot turn this off when your job is done and you are now at home. And for most of you in this world of first responders, you know this to be true as well. When you leave work and you take off your uniform, you don't stop being an officer. You continue to be an officer in your civilian clothes. And that's not true for most other jobs. Most other jobs, when people leave the office and they put on their clothes at home, they're their home version of themselves. And in your case, it's a lot more difficult to do that. The reason being is you're in training to this all day long, all day long. And then you go home, and this is robustly exercised, and this is not. And now suddenly you're supposed to shift and become a compassionate, forgiving, big picture self who can leave work at work and enjoy the moment of life. But this has not been exercised. So what I want to share with you today is how, when you can, when work is over, how can you down-regulate this to bring resources here to better serve the quality of your life at home, so that when you're at work and you have to be here, you can do so with full presence. And when you're at home, you can be there with full presence. So the relationship between the front part of the brain and the stress center is really, really important for you to understand. So I'm going to move into a couple of ways that you can best support this dynamic. And one of them is what you're eating. I'm not here to preach a particular sort of diet. I'm not here to preach a lifestyle of ethical food choices. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the physiology of stress. So, what do you think this part of the brain uses effortlessly and functions very well using this type of fuel? Sugar. This part of the brain can function very easily with garbage fuel, with malnourishment, with lack of sleep, with lack of exercise. Think about it. You haven't slept, you're overtired, you've been sitting, you've been sedentary, and you've been eating garbage food. Is it easier to be reactionary or to be compassionate and forgiving? It's easier to be reactionary. The reason is this part of the brain functions on very little reserves, and garbage reserves at that. It knows how to do that. And this is a gift, because we want to be able to jump into fight or flight mode to save our lives, even if we're exhausted. This is why it works so well on limited reserves. This part of the brain, the part that makes us our best self when we're not in crisis, does not function that way. It needs prime fuel. It needs a lot of sleep. It needs regular sleep, like 8 hours a night of sleep. And I'm sure many of you understand that that's not a reality for you. So right out of the gate, if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep, you're compromising your ability to use this when you need it. What it also needs is fat, lots of fat. Think about this. Most of us have been put on low-fat diets to save cholesterol. There's a lot of research out there now that you can look into that talks about how that's actually not the case. But what this part of the brain needs is fat. Your brain is 60% fat. If I were to take this brain, which is about average size, the dry weight of this brain is made of 60% fat. And that fat needs to be ingested and replaced. And all of that fat is necessary for our brain cells, our neurons, to signal functionality to every part of our body. So the brain shoots electric current out of the cells, down shafts or axons, to communicate signals. Those signals equal thoughts, behaviors, a desire to move my arm. The fact that I'm talking is a function of those signals. Those signals do not fire properly without fat. Fat is the conducting mechanism of all the electric current in the brain. So a low-fat diet is going to starve your brain of the healthy fats it needs to conduct this complex signaling. And when that happens and that's compromised, we then rely on the part of the brain that knows how to handle it when everything else is falling apart. And so we're going to rely more and more and more physiologically on our stress centers when we're not eating fat, because we have impaired our use of this. So what is healthy fat? I'm going to give you a list of foods that you can work into any lifestyle diet that you have that will support your brain's functioning and will help you regulate your stress. The first recommendation is to minimize your sugar. Whatever that means to you. Maybe some of you use a lot of sugar. Minimize the white refined sugar. The other aspect of sugar is the fact that our body makes it from carbohydrates. So, a big picture is bread, pasta, white starchy foods, processed grains, all equal sugar to the body. So you can make that equation. Cut out sugar and those things that equal sugar to the body. So you would do well to support a healing regimen from stress and regulating your own ability to deal with stress in a positive way if you minimize your carbohydrates. From there, you would want to add in healthy fats and proteins. What are healthy fats? Because we've all heard, don't eat trans fats, don't eat fried foods, fats are bad, fats are bad. Here are the healthy fats that are good. Olive oil, coconut oil, fat from fish, particularly salmon, fat from nuts and seeds, avocados. Those are sources of healthy fats. If you began adding those into your daily food intake in whatever way serves you best, you will start to support your brain's dynamic to downregulate your stress response. And for some of us who are meat eaters, a great source of both fat and protein is grass-fed beef. And just a short moment on grass-fed beef. If you're vegetarian, then this does not apply to you. But if you are eating meat, grass-fed beef is a great source of essential amino acids. Those are the proteins that make all of the chemicals in the brain that conduct all of our body's needs. Thoughts, behaviors, emotions, actions. They're called neurotransmitters. Without protein, we don't make them. We make them in the gut, we make them in the brain, and if you're on a low protein diet, you're not giving your body the building blocks to make your neurotransmitters. If you're eating meat, grass-fed beef has all of the essential proteins, amino acids necessary to make all of the neurotransmitters that comes from the grass that the cattle eats. And then you get the healthy fat from the meat as well, so you're getting a combination of fat and protein in a grass-fed product. If you're vegetarian, then you want to make sure that you get enough protein from whatever your favorite source of protein is, and enough fat through nuts, seeds, supplements, and even fish oil if you eat fish, or you can get oil that is easily assimilated in the brain from marine-based algae, and you can get that as a supplement. So minimizing the sugar and the carbs is going to set you up physiologically to entrain this part of your brain to be a powerhouse, to come online when you need it. That plus sleep will do miraculous changes in your ability to deal with stress. There are some other things that I want to talk about in terms of your ability to deal with stress before we get into an experience of some mental entrainment exercises. Exercise. You've heard it. You've probably been told to exercise. But what I will tell you is if you exercise regularly, it does not have to be at a gym. You don't have to use that as your excuse why you can't because you don't have time to go to a gym. It could be some cardio, walking around your block, running up and down the stairs at your house, whatever works for you. But when you exercise, there's an area of this part of the brain called the hippocampus that produces a growth hormone. Exercise increases this particular growth hormone. If you increase the production of this particular growth hormone called BDNF, then what you do is you increase your ability to regenerate your brain cells, to keep yourself cognitively sharp, to keep this exercised and online, and to not fall victim to this cycle. So exercise is more than just weight and calories and waist size and muscle mass. It's far more than that. It is an increase in a vital growth hormone in the brain that's going to help you navigate stress way more gracefully for the rest of your life and to keep you in a state of mental cognitive sharpness. So that's what I want to impress upon you with exercise. And there is an interesting phenomenon that I want to share with you about shaking. I don't know if any of you have heard of tremor release exercises, but it's a process where you shake and twitch your body. And I want to backtrack and tell you the mechanisms that lead up to this so you understand why this is so effective and so important. When you're in your hypervigilant state, your fight or flight state, your readiness state at work, you have elevated levels of adrenaline and cortisol in your body. You need these so that you can have fast reaction time, increased peripheral vision, a heightened sense of smell, a heightened sense of your space around you, and increased oxygen and blood available in your large muscle masses in case you have to bolt and chase somebody. So you need to have adrenaline elevated and cortisol elevated in your body in order to be in that state. But what that does is it keeps your muscles in a readiness and contracted state. It inhibits blood flow in the internal organs because the blood is flowing to the large muscle masses. So you compromise your digestion, you compromise your ability to absorb nutrients, you compromise your ability to have long, deep, slow breaths and a nice, even heart rate. So all of these things get compromised to keep you ready. Shallow breathing, elevated blood pressure, no digestion, gets you ready for action. Over time, that will predispose you to chronic adrenal fatigue. That's going to predispose you to any number of neurodegenerative diseases that we have today that ails us as a modern civilization. Type 2 diabetes, mental depression, substance abuse, addictions, thoughts of suicide, high blood pressure, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, just to name a few. This comes from chronic elevated states of adrenaline and cortisol in the body. Heart disease added to that. So, how do we quickly and effectively downregulate, turn down the adrenaline and cortisol in the body? And I want you to understand what an animal in the wild would do because our nervous systems function the same way. If you've ever seen an animal in the wild narrowly escape from a predator, they will go away and hide and their pelts will twitch all over their whole body. What they're doing is they are dissipating the contractions, the adrenaline contractions in the muscles. They're dissipating them, using it all, and they are bringing their nervous system back to homeostasis, back to regulation. back to restoration and healing. What that's doing for them is it's bringing blood back to the internal organs, and it's allowing the release of that contracted state, and it's regulating the hormonal response. We function the same way. So added to dietary changes, if you were to, in private, go shake wildly after a call, after work, before work, for 2 to 3 minutes, if you were to shake for 2 to 3 minutes every day, a few times a day in private, you would be doing vast amounts of regulation for your nervous system to bring down the adrenaline and cortisol. And you might feel weird doing it, so I suggest doing it in private. But it is vital to your body's ability to maintain its homeostasis, your brain's ability to stay healthy, and your ability to not get sucked into a chronic fight or flight state, which is going to cause adrenal fatigue, which is going to predispose you to all of these horrible diseases. So having said all that, what you can do effortlessly right now today is incorporate healthy fats, healthy proteins, cut down the sugars, exercise and shake, and you will change your ability to deal with stress indefinitely. If you did that every day and nothing more, you would be far healthier than if you didn't do those things. So now we know that to be in our fight or flight state all the time is detrimental. And it does so at the expense of our ability to be here. And when we're home from work, we would like to be here. It would serve us best. It would help regulate those hormones, help us enjoy life a little bit more, help us maybe be a little more relatable to those we love, and to find a lot more enjoyment and presence in our day-to-day that doesn't require us going back to an adrenalized state to feel alive again. So how do we do this with mental entrainment? Because food can do it, exercise can help, shaking can help, and then mental entrainment is the icing on the cake. Some of you may have experience with mental entrainment where you are envisioning or rehearsing a mental script of how a certain procedure is going to go. And you do that over and over and over again so that eventually over time you can react as though that script had been practiced. So you're working off a script that you rehearse until it becomes an effortless, retrievable action or memory in your body. This is how we get better at use of firearms. This is how we get better at playing instruments, at playing sports. Any activity that we want to get better at requires us to create and rehearse scripts. Some of those are scripts in the body, physical motions, and some of those are mental scripts. So what neurosculpting is doing is it's using this idea of mental entrainment, and it's putting a nice, neat little container to it. So in this mental entrainment exercise that we'll do for probably about 10 minutes, that's about it. You may or may not have very visual experiences. It doesn't matter. When I ask you to close your eyes and mentally imagine something, you don't have to see anything, you don't have to feel anything, you just have to pretend that you're creating this mental imagery. And your brain doesn't know the difference. This part of the brain does not know the difference between that which we see with our eyes, that which we feel with our body, and that which we imagine. It's all the same to this part of the brain. So we're going to use mental entrainment because that's the language that the fight or flight center understands. And we're going to use it to help quiet the fight or flight center. So in this brief 10-minute exercise, what I will do for you is I'll ask you to close your eyes. If you're in a situation where you can, great. If not, you can do this with your eyes open. And I will guide you with voice prompts to just notice some things about your body, about your breathing, about your comfort level. From there, once you have begun noticing some of those things, what I will do is I will just guide you through a little mental exercise that you can do that takes advantage of this part of the brain quieting and helps activate this part of the brain. So the exercise itself is an entrainment to quiet this and activate this. And inside of that exercise, I'm just going to give you some suggestions for mental images to think about. You don't have to take those suggestions. You can think about anything you'd like. And it's just going to be a quick little exercise, but my intention for this is that in 10 minutes, I can give you at least a little experience of how you can adapt mental entrainment for your own purposes. And then we'll sort of wrap it up and talk about how you can take some of these steps into your day-to-day. So having said that, if you're in a comfortable place to do this exercise, then that's great. If not, then just listen, and maybe this will remind you or give you some ideas of what you could do on your own. And so for this next 10 minutes, if you would just be comfortable, and I'm going to ring this bell on occasion between voice prompts, sort of just to set a pace. So if you would just take a moment to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and just notice with anything going on in your environment, just notice that you can become aware of your own breathing. Maybe you notice if it's fast or if it's long and slow. Noticing as you become aware of your breath that you might be able to trace the air as it enters in through the mouth or the nose, going down into the lungs and back out again. Noticing as you breathe in and out that you might become aware of your stomach rising and falling in sync with your own effortless breath. Breathing in and out, you might notice that your lungs effortlessly expand and contract the same way each time, with or without your attention. Breathing in and out, noticing that your breath, predictable and consistent, is in full support of your body in each and every moment, whether you realize it or not. And maybe you even notice that with each breath you can relax your body a little bit more, becoming more and more comfortable. Noticing that gravity encourages you to sink more deeply into your chair and your seat with each breath. Maybe noticing that your breath can loosen some muscles. Or maybe your bones become heavier with each breath as gravity supports you. Your breath breathing itself, sitting more and more fully into your own seat. And maybe you notice that you are safe enough to be in this exercise right now, and that you are nourished and sheltered enough to be in this exercise right now, in this moment, as your breath breathes itself. as you continue to breathe, you might also notice that you can direct your awareness anywhere you'd like it to go. So just notice that you can bring your awareness to your fingertips. Maybe you notice the temperature of the air against your fingers, or what you might be resting your fingers on right now. Maybe you notice that you can bring your attention to the backs of your eyelids. Or maybe you notice that you can bring your awareness to your feet. What is going on with your feet right now? And from this place of effortless breath, full support from gravity, and your ability to direct your awareness, you can be assured that anything else that happens in this mental entrainment is for you to adapt, discard, embrace as you see fit. This is your experience. And if you could draw to mind right now one of your stressors from this week, maybe that was the stress at work, maybe that's administration, or maybe that was a call you went on and that was a harsh image that stuck in your mind, or maybe that's stress at home, or maybe that's your checkbook, or your rundown car. And notice as you draw this stress to mind, this one event from this week, this one memory, this one thought, that maybe you imagine the details, maybe you have emotions. And if you could take this one thought, this one stress, and have it represented as just a color, a texture, a vibration, a symbol, what would you choose to represent this one stress? Maybe for you, it would be black or sticky. Maybe it would be sharp. Or red, or hot. This one stress represented as a color, or a vibration, or a texture. Your breath breathing itself. If you could imagine your body as a transparent container, I wonder where you would imagine your body holds this color, this texture, this stress. Maybe you have no mental images at all, or maybe you have a vague sense that your jaw holds it, or maybe your stomach, or your neck muscles, or maybe you imagine this color in your body, somewhere or everywhere. And if you could imagine the most perfect, strong container that could collect up and hold and contain all of this, if you could imagine that out in front of you, I wonder what you might imagine. Maybe that's a garbage truck or a hole in the ground. And as your breath breathes itself, notice what you would need to imagine this color, this texture, pouring out of your own body and into that container. And maybe you notice something about the nature of that imagery or that release. Maybe you notice body sensations, or heat, or lightness. And if your awareness goes to places in your body that you imagine are releasing this, you are invited to tap those areas in recognition with your non-dominant hand, if that's comfortable for you. Identification, location, acknowledge, release. Your breath still breathing itself. I wonder how you would like to get rid of that container. Maybe you'd like to send it off to a garbage dump or blow it up, or just erase it from your mind. And maybe you even notice a little more space inside your own body. And if you could choose a name or a phrase or a label that would help remind you effortlessly of the most important part of this mental entrainment experience, I wonder what you would name it. And you can begin to bring your awareness back to the rhythm of your breath, maybe noticing if it's any different than when you started. Bringing your awareness back to your surroundings. And when you feel ready, you can end your exercise. So with that brief 10-minute exercise, it might have felt very simplistic. You might have felt nothing at all. You might have felt something. But what the design of that exercise is doing is very complex in terms of what it's engaging in your brain. There are whole classes we teach on what the process itself does. But suffice it to say that that process, the way it was guided, helps first quiet this, second activate this, and then through the way I use my language, what we're doing is we're engaging both left and right hemispheres of the brain in alternating sequence, so that we are enhancing our brain's ability to take this mental entrainment exercise and invest in its creation, and then store it so that it can become a script that you rehearse over and over again. And in this particular storyline, I just had you imagine a stress and assign it a random color, texture, vibration, and go imagine finding it in your body and imagine releasing it. And it's very simplistic, but the structure and the architecture is really the power of what's going on here. So what I wanted to do was give you a brief taste of it, so that if you want to know more and go much more in depth with some of the mental entrainment exercises, that you could have opportunities to do so here at the Institute if you wanted to. But I wanted to make sure that I cover any of your questions if you have them, and let you know what's coming up here. So to do a high cap review, You are in a vocation that demands that you are here more often than not. So to balance that, you have to exercise here when you are not at work. To do so and support your ability to do that in an ongoing manner, you need to have regular sleep, if possible. You need to minimize your sugar and carbohydrate intake. You have to increase your consumption of healthy fat and protein and water. I didn't mention water. You need to start shaking to quickly regulate your nervous system after really intense days at work. And then you need to have an exercise practice program that's going to stimulate those growth hormones in the brain. And then you need to have some form of mental entrainment, because if you don't create structured mental entrainment exercises, you will default to mental entrainment. You'll just entrain to those stress thoughts over and over again. So you are in mental entrainment all the time. You're just doing it based off old dominant patterns. So this is a very short taste that I wanted to give you of what you can do immediately to start affecting a greater quality of life for yourself, both on the job and off the job. With neurosculpting, what we try to do is offer a platform for an individual to find a sense of stress navigation and healing at any depth that they want to go to. My intention and my mission with the Institute is to offer this live stream again in the fall, and this is where you come in. If you found value in this class, please email the Institute. And if you are comfortable and would like to email a testimonial to info@neurosculptinginstitute.com that you give us permission to share, we can start sharing the testimonials with those agencies that offer grant funding. And the more of those that we can do, the more opportunities we have to get grants to offer this. My goal is to offer this once a quarter, and then to offer more robust trainings that are beyond an hour scope, similar to what I do when I fly to agencies. If you found value in this training and you would like to bring me into your agency, I am more than happy to discuss ways to do that. And then lastly, there's 2 audio programs that you can, they're self-paced, you can listen to them on your own. This is Neurosculpting for Stress Relief, available anywhere books are sold. You could go on the website and see this on the homepage, Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And then Neurosculpting, a step-by-step program to change your brain and transform your life. This is 2 hours, this is 6 hours. And I've narrated both of them. And this is self-paced, so you can listen to it over and over again. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for being here.